So then you grow up, you have ups and downs, you go to sleep, you come into alignment, you wake up, you're out of alignment, you appreciate, you get back into alignment, you criticize, you get out of alignment, you love someone, you get into alignment, you hate someone, you get out of alignment, you watch a movie that feels wonderful, you get into alignment, you watch CNN, you get out of alignment. In other words, and then you learn to meditate, you get into alignment. In other words, you live life and sometimes get out of alignment. You croak, you go back into alignment. So you get the sense of this. You have the potential of maintaining that alignment once you know what you're looking for. So what you're looking for is alignment. And what alignment feels like is love and appreciation and joy. It feels like passion. It feels like freedom. It's the perception really of freedom. And we use the word perception because you're so free you can choose bondage. No one can vibrate for you, so you're doing it all to you. Whether you like it or not, whether you like what you're doing or not, you are doing it all to you. But on that end of the scale, it feels like freedom. On the other end of the scale, which feels like fear, it feels like despair, that is your perception of no power. That's your perception of no freedom. That's the feeling of disempowerment. The way you feel is your indication of where you are on this scale. Now, what's this scale? This scale is this crack that we're talking about, isn't it? It's that vibrational relativity between who you really are and not just who you were before you were born, and not just who you were the day you were born, who you have become as a result of being in this masterful, wonderful experience where life is causing you to become more. So have we made the point? You can't not keep up to speed with who you have become and ever feel good. In other words, life can't cause you to become this and you ever feel really good when you're over here beating the drum of this. You got to get up to speed with who you are. So how do you do that? You recognize that the way you feel, that the emotions that you feel are your indicator of how you're doing on this emotional scale. You recognize that when you make a statement and really mean it, nothing is more important than that I feel good, and then you make the effort to feel good, then you can get up the emotional scale on any subject that you want. And it's an interesting thing. We really want you to realize that you might see someone who's experiencing the trauma of the death of someone that they love, who's in despair. And then you might see someone else who seems to have everything in the world going right, who is feeling despair over something that seems utterly insignificant to you. You want to say, get a life, for heaven's sakes. Why are you so worried about that? And we want to say to you, lovingly, mind your own business. Because you don't know what anybody else is doing with their scale. In other words, you have no way of knowing what the vibrational relativity is for anyone else, just like no one else has any way of knowing what it is for you. Esther had an interesting experience this week. They're not in San Antonio very often. They're gone mostly. And when they come home, it's always so fun to see the progression on the projects and that sort of thing. And they have refurbished a little guest cottage that they have actually moved into while they're in the process of figuring out what they're going to do about building a new house. And they're not there very much, but when they're there, they're really enjoying it. And one of the most recent wonderful things was a beautiful patio was built with beautiful stones all around this little guest house. It's really very lovely. And so they came home. It looked so pretty. Jerry and Esther just raved about it, and it's always the newest thing that gets their attention, and that was the newest thing. And they were there a couple of days, and then Esther went outside, and she noticed that they were badly stained, sort of in places. She couldn't figure out what had happened, and it turned out that the oak had stained them, and for a little while, the landscape architect master said that he surmised that what had happened was they had fertilized. And then the fertilizer, when the sprinklers came on, had caused puddles. And then some chemical in the fertilizer had permanently stained the stone. Well, Esther felt very sad about this because she only got to see it in its perfect form for one day. It seemed wrong that someone who should know better would make such a mistake. So she said to Jerry, what are our alternatives? And Jerry said, we could tear it out and replace it, which seemed drastic. Or we could live with it, which seemed unfair. And Esther tried to put her mind on other things, but she got in quite a funk as she kept looking out the window at it. And so she took her bucket and her little metal brush, and she went out and brushed it to see if she could make a difference. Maybe they just didn't try hard enough, she thought. she made no difference at all, and got feeling even worse. And then she got thinking about how it should be different than that, and how much they pay those gardeners to take care of all of that, and how they should know better, and that even if the one who's sprinkling the stuff doesn't know better, somebody who's watching him sprinkle it should know better, and whoever sent him should know better, and somebody should call somebody, because there's something very wrong about this. And strange as it may seem to anyone looking at Esther, who surely has the closest thing to a perfect life of anyone that you know, Esther began feeling powerless. She began thinking things like, I can't stay home, and I can't find the people to watch the people to keep things like this from happening. And then she started worrying about the beautiful stones over at the center building. Really beautiful stones. Stones that were hauled in with big cranes. Stones that cannot be easily replaced. And she started out in joy, saw the rocks, went to frustration, scrubbed them with her brush, went to overwhelmment, made a few phone calls, went to anger, and finally, by the end of the day, was in the feeling of utter powerlessness. And Jerry is doing his best to stay clear of Esther, because he can't fix it, and he can't make her feel differently than she's feeling. And now Esther is mad at Jerry for staying clear of her. She thinks he should at least have the courtesy to suffer with her, or to agree with her that her suffering is appropriate. He wouldn't even give her that. So Esther said, as she took her computer, there is a new process in the Amazing Power book that says, what has happened, the contrasting experience that has happened. So Esther made a computer program for herself with 4 fields. What's happened is, and she made the statement very clear, much as we have just given it to you. Someone stained my rocks, they've ruined it, they've made it not look good, and not only that, but other bad things could happen in the same way, because I'm not here to watch what everybody does. And then she put, what is the desire that is born out of that? And her desire was that she not care. And then she thought, no, that's not my desire. I don't want to stop caring. I don't want to lower my standards. All right, my desire is that I don't feel so bad about things. My desire is that I surround myself with people that really know what they're doing. My desire is really that I'm able to maintain my balance regardless of these kind of silly things that are happening. That was really the bottom line of the desire that was born within her. And then the next field says, and what are the emotions that I'm feeling? And Esther wrote powerlessness. And then she wrote overwhelmment. It feels like overwhelmment, powerless. So then she said to Jerry, who had stuck his head inside for a moment, I'm going to work on my computer for a little while because my thoughts are killing me. And she was being a little over dramatic, but she knows the power of thought, and she could feel how bad she felt over something that anybody outside of her would have said was ridiculous. But then they don't get to choose, do they? Because they don't know how she dreamed it, how she saw it, how she visualizes it when she's driving down the road, how she wants it to be. Nobody gets to decide what she gets to want. She gets to decide. But nobody can control how she feels but her. And she couldn't dig the stones up, and she couldn't take the chemical back, and she couldn't scrub it off with her brush. She couldn't do anything other than the only thing that you can ever do anyway was to change the way she felt. And at that point, she wasn't even sure she could do that. So she sat there on a sofa in the cottage with her computer, and now she's in the 4th field, which is closing the vibrational gap, which means just talk until I feel better. Do anything I can do, find any thought that I can find that makes me feel the slightest bit better. And the very best thing about feeling so bad is that it's easy to find things that make you feel better. So Esther sat there, and she looked around the room that she was sitting in. And right before her is an old fireplace that's been there for many years. It was built with this old house. And on the face of the fireplace, in fact, on both sides of it, but she could only see one side, is a magnificent mantle that was carved out of a piece of manzanita. And it was so heavy that it took 3 men to lift it. And so the designer designed big metal sculptures that come out of the fireplace and hold it up. It is a work of art, prettiest thing that Esther's ever seen on an old fireplace. And as she looked at it, she thought, boy, those people really did a good job. Someone other than Esther designed it. Someone other than Esther found the wood. Someone other than Esther carved it. Someone other than Esther orchestrated it. Someone other than Esther designed the metal pieces. In other words, it was beautiful. And then she looked into the kitchen, all beautiful, with a beautiful iron wine rack that's been orchestrated where the old oven was in the stack of bricks. And then she looked at the ceiling that has new beaded board on it, and the beautiful knotty pine walls that have been completely refurbished and restained. And then she looked at the furniture that was gathered around, and then she looked beyond the paving out the window to the magnificent landscaping. And as she focused upon the things that are so very right and began looking for thoughts of appreciation about the magnificent number of people that have been working in her absence and have turned that cottage into something so beautiful, she felt her vibration raise. This darkness lifted right off of her. Now, for those of you who weren't feeling her pain, this whole story must sound silly. But if you've ever had something bothering you and nobody else agreed that you ought to even be bothered, you know that pain is pain, no matter what the reason for it. And when you are used to being tuned in, tapped in, turned on, when you have pure positive energy flowing through you the majority of the time, when you dip into those deeper, darker vibrations, you feel awful. You cannot slip back from who you have become and ever feel good again. You cannot know who you really are and how you're supposed to feel and dip out of it and ever be happy. Esther was less unhappy about the stone than she was about being unhappy. She didn't want to be unhappy. She didn't want Jerry to see her unhappy. She was embarrassed about being unhappy, but she can't control the circumstances of her life. And some of those circumstances made her temporarily unhappy, but once she got hold of it and once she made a decision, she knew she could close the gap. And that's what we want you to understand. If you've got cancer and they've pronounced you dying, you can still close the gap. You don't gotta die, not with this cancer, not right now. You don't have to do it. It's your option. Esther could have died over stones. We're not kidding you. She could have made herself so miserable about that, it could have taken her out if she had chosen to allow it. It would have taken a little while. Unfortunately, the distraction of her life would have probably not made that likely. But it is possible to get so fixated on something that bothers you that you use that one excuse as your reason not to allow the energy that is really you to flow. And you know, when you've lived enough life that you've launched enough rockets that you've got a powerful stream of energy pulling through you, you've got to let it flow. The longer you live, the more energy pours through you, and the more important it is that you open your valve and let it flow. You don't have as much leeway when you're 80 or 70 or 60 or 50 than you did when you're 5 and 10 and 20 and 30. The longer you live, the more energy you summon, because the more life has caused you to ask for more things, you see. It's important that you get a handle on this crack. It's important that you close the gap. So Esther sat there, and all of a sudden, in her feeling better, a thought came to her that actually made her feel joyous. She thought, that paving has always been too light. It has always looked too new. This is a very old house. We are renovating an old house. We want the place to look old. What could make it look more old than that? We'll just ask them to come and make the same mistake on all the stone. And then she thought, I really do mean that. In other words, I remember the first time I saw that stone. I did think it looked a little light. And then she thought, maybe this is the universe's way. I launched that little rocket, and maybe the universe has been orchestrating this all along, and maybe I'm not a crappy creator. Maybe it really did go the way it is supposed to go, because the universe is satisfying something that I ultimately want. And we say, yes, friends, it's always that way. Source is always working for your good. You are not negative creators. You are not evil creators. You are not bad creators. You are not inappropriate creators. You are living life and giving birth, and that's it. You're giving birth to desires which the universe is knocking itself out to help you accommodate, but you got to line up with what you are asking for in order for it to happen easily. We want Esther to never have another negative day, but we know she will.